Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Today for my devotional, I wanted to look at a passage from a book on the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. So you might have heard of Søren Kierkegaard before. He's a very famous philosopher. Again, he's Danish, so that means he was from Denmark and he lived in the 1800s. He's generally regarded as the father of existentialism, if you've heard of that philosophical movement. Some people think others like, say, Friedrich Nietzsche was the father of existentialism, but I really think it was Kierkegaard. He was, to me, the first existentialist. And so this book, I was thinking about it, and it's called Kierkegaard, a Christian Missionary to Christians. Kierkegaard, a Christian Missionary to Christians. Now, if you know anything about Kierkegaard, that title makes sense to you, because Kierkegaard grew up, as I said, in Denmark, and he grew up going to the Church of Denmark, just like everybody else in his country. The Church of Denmark was the established state church. Everyone was a member by virtue of their birth in the Church of Denmark. Everyone attended services. Everyone's tax money went to support the church. The church had a great amount of control in the society. So Kierkegaard grew up in the Church of Denmark. But Kierkegaard became a great critic of the Church of Denmark because he thought that it was devoutly Christian on the surface, but if you went deeper than that, he didn't think that it functioned in a Christian way. He thought that the Church of Denmark had really forgotten its reason for existence. And so he was constantly critiquing the Church of Denmark. He thought that it had become milquetoast and stale, that it didn't serve the purpose it was created to serve. And he really criticized not only the Church of Denmark, but he criticized most Christians who were living. So he thought most Christians really had forgotten the point of their faith. And he was a little bit like John Wesley a couple hundred years earlier, was a critic of the Church of England and wanted to reform it. Kierkegaard was much the same way, except his critiques were much deeper and much harsher. And in fact, Kierkegaard usually published much of what he wrote anonymously or using pseudonyms because he was in fear of the repercussions if people really knew what he was writing or what he was thinking. And so Kierkegaard was a very compelling thinker when it came to criticizing the established church and most Christians. And his goal in criticizing Christianity as it existed was to get people to think more deeply about their commitment to following Jesus. So for Kierkegaard, he thought that following Jesus or becoming a Christian was a life-defining choice. He coined the frame leap of faith. So he thought it was a leap of faith to become a Christian, and he thought that it should be treated with awe and reverence, whereas most other people simply treat it as commonplace. No big deal. Oh, you're a Christian, you follow Jesus, yeah, that's what you do. No, Kierkegaard thought it was something that changed your entire life, your entire being, the way that you lived in the world. And so Kierkegaard was all about helping Christians to understand what they were really committing to. Now, as I said, I was going to read a passage from this book, but I decided not to because as I leafed through it and looked at some things I could talk about, I realized that it's probably way too difficult to explain even one little passage in a 2 or 3 minute devotional, or really even in a sermon, because Kierkegaard is very, very philosophical, very complex. He was truly a deep thinker. Conceptually, it takes a lot of work to understand what he's trying to say and to wrap your mind around it. So I decided not to actually read anything from him or from this book, but it did remind me of something, and that's this. You know, Kierkegaard was a figure who loved to question, who loved to wonder why things were the way they were and go deeper. And I think that is important for us to know, because many of us also have questions. We have questions about our faith. Maybe we even have doubts about our faith. And oftentimes, I think we're afraid to admit that. I have a lot of people that come up to me and they ask questions that are related to faith. And a lot of times, it's almost like they're embarrassed. You know, they'll ask a question and they're like, oh, am I really allowed to ask that? Is that out of bounds to ask a question like this? And my response is always no. I think that's a great thing. You know, if you have questions or even doubts about your faith, that is really a sign that your faith is healthy and growing, that you take it seriously enough that you want to go deeper. You know, questions and theological wonderings are really the fuel that drive us to trust God more deeply, to know God more deeply. Faith is all about asking questions. So if you're asking questions, that is a good thing. That's a sign that your faith is alive and active. And so I want to encourage you, if you have questions, if you have doubts even about faith, you're not the first one to have those questions. In fact, I guarantee you that many other people, probably people in this church, are asking the same sorts of questions, wondering the same sorts of things. And indeed, many of the great philosophers and theologians throughout the course of history, again, I guarantee, have asked the same things. That's how many theologians really approach faith, is they begin with a posture of questioning, and then they write essays and books trying to answer questions and think through them. So I just want you to be secure, knowing that it's not a bad thing to have questions, to wonder theologically. That's actually a very good thing. And I would encourage you to keep doing that, because it helps you to go deeper in your faith. And if you have any questions that you'd ever like to talk to me about, I'd love to talk about those things. I love those sorts of conversations. But again, I just want to encourage you that questions and even doubts aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they can be a very healthy thing. And you're not the only one that has those. So rest assured in that. I hope to talk to you about some of those things sometime if you'd like to. But even more importantly than that, I hope to see you in worship soon. We'll talk to you later.